I was standing in front of the huge glass doors of the boardroom when my boss, CEO Michael Turner, announced over the company-wide video call that yet another promotion discussion was postponed. He looked right at me, paused for dramatic effect, then said, "You're still too junior to lead that team." All the other department heads nodded like puppets on strings. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. The betrayal was sharp and immediate. I'd spent 5 years doing the work, staying late nights when everyone else went home, covering for others when they failed, mentoring my team through impossible deadlines. Every single time I pushed for recognition, Michael blocked me with a different excuse. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. My name is Allison Parker. I was the senior product strategist at ClearPoint Technologies, one of the rising mid-sized software firms in Boston. 4 years, I believed in loyalty. I believed in paying my dues, in keeping my head down and doing excellent work. I thought that was enough. I thought someone would eventually notice. Until loyalty became my cage, and excellence became invisible. After that boardroom slap, I started quietly planning my exit even as I stayed for the sake of my team and my reputation. Fast forward 2 years. I walk into Skyline Innovations as their new head of strategy. That morning, I'm handed a press release that makes my coffee go cold. Skyline has acquired the entire AI division of ClearPoint Technologies, Michael Turner's domain. The division whose projects I'd led, whose talented engineers I'd built up and trained. Now, Skyline owns the patents, the team, and the legacy. And I'm leading it all. The boardroom is silent except for the hum of the projector. I've just finished presenting the most successful quarter our division has ever seen. 3 major clients signed. Revenue up 42%. Customer satisfaction scores at an all-time high. I'm standing at the front, laptop still open, slide deck still glowing on the massive screen behind me, when Michael Turner says the words that slice through me like a knife. "You've got talent, Allison. Real talent. But I don't see you as leadership material." His voice is calm, almost kind, which makes it worse somehow. Then he turns to Zach, the man who took credit for my roadmap, who presented my ideas as his own in 3 consecutive board meetings, and announces his promotion to Vice President of Product Strategy. I sit down slowly, carefully, like I'm made of glass that might shatter. I feel my hands start to shake, so I press them flat against the cool conference table. The VP title was supposed to be mine. Everyone knew it. I'd earned it through late nights and weekend work, through salvaging failed projects and turning around angry clients. But all I hear now is the quiet scratching of pens on paper and coffee cups clinking against saucers. Nobody speaks for me. Not one person. Not even Jeremy, the junior analyst I'd spent 2 years mentoring. Not even Vanessa, who I'd helped get promoted last year. Not even the team I'd personally built from the ground up. I just got erased in front of 11 people, and they all watched it happen in silence. I shut my laptop with a sharp snap that echoes in the quiet room. Zach avoids my eyes completely, suddenly fascinated by something on his phone. He's wearing the Navy suit he only puts on when he's gunning for something big, and I realize he knew about this promotion days ago. Maybe weeks. I look around the room slowly, studying each face, and the truth crashes over me like cold water. They all knew. The other directors with their careful blank expressions. The HR representative taking notes she doesn't need. Michael's assistant sitting in the corner with her tablet. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the moment. This was planned, orchestrated, rehearsed. They'd all agreed behind closed doors that I didn't deserve to lead my own product, the one I conceptualized and built from nothing. My voice cracks when I ask, when did you all decide I didn't deserve to lead my own product? The question hangs in the air like smoke. Michael smiles politely, the smile he uses with difficult clients. Let's keep this professional, Allison. Professional. He wants professional. You stole my career, and you want professional. I want to scream it, to flip the table, to make them all see what they've done. But instead, I gather my laptop and my notes with hands that won't stop trembling. The walk to the door feels like walking through deep water. Behind me, I hear someone clear their throat nervously. Then Michael's voice again, already moving to the next agenda item like I was never there at all. I walk past the rows of glass offices, keeping my face completely blank, even though inside I'm spiraling into panic and rage. Inside, every emotion is screaming. I hear whispers trailing behind me like smoke. My team saw the announcement already. Someone forwarded the email before I even left the boardroom. I passed Jeremy, the junior analyst I personally mentored for 2 years, teaching him everything I knew about client relations and strategic planning. He looks down at his desk like it's the most interesting thing he's ever seen. I step into the elevator and press the button for my floor. The doors close with a soft sound, and I finally breathe. The kind of breath that feels like drowning, like coming up for air after being held underwater. My reflection stares back at me from the polished steel doors. I look the same as I did an hour ago, but everything has changed. At my desk, I open Slack with shaking fingers. There's already a "Congrats, Zach" thread, and it's 83 messages long and growing. I scroll through the enthusiastic responses, the digital high fives, the praise for his leadership. No mention of me. Not one. It's like I never existed. That night, I stayed late to close out 3 major project deliverables, all of which would be submitted under Zach's name tomorrow morning. I stared at the office lights reflecting off the empty windows outside and thought, he blocked me for years. But he has no idea who I'm about to become. None of them do. 2 years earlier, I was up for a promotion to senior strategist. I just finished building our AI pricing model from scratch, working nights and weekends for 6 months straight. The model was revolutionary, cutting client onboarding time by 60% and increasing accuracy by 43%. Michael had me present it to the board, walking them through every technical detail, every strategic application, every revenue projection. Afterward, he pulled me aside in the hallway outside the boardroom. His hand on my shoulder felt heavy, almost fatherly. The team sees you more as a doer than a leader. Don't take it personally, he said with what seemed like genuine concern. And I believed him. I actually believed him. I went home that night to my empty apartment and questioned everything about myself. Was I too quiet in meetings? Too focused on the actual work instead of the political games? Too technical? Not charismatic enough? I started speaking up more, volunteering for presentations, trying to be more visible in every possible way. I changed my wardrobe to look more executive. I practiced being more assertive. I took a leadership course on weekends. But nothing changed. Every single time I stepped forward, Michael found a new reason to step me back. Too aggressive now. Not quite ready. Needs more seasoning. The excuses changed constantly, but the answer was always the same. No. And I watched less qualified people get promoted around me while I stayed frozen in place. I remember the exact day Michael assigned Zach to shadow me. It was a Tuesday morning in March, cold rain against the windows. He could learn a lot from how you handle clients, Michael said, dropping by my desk with his coffee. Show him the ropes. Help him understand our strategic approach. It seemed reasonable at the time. I was good at my job. Sharing knowledge was what team players did. So I agreed. 3 months later, Zach was presenting my entire strategy framework to the board while I sat in the back taking notes like an assistant. They used me to train him, and I let them. Every technique I developed over years of trial and error, every client relationship I'd carefully built, every process I'd created and refined, I handed over piece by piece. Because that's what good team players do, right? They share knowledge. They help others succeed. They don't worry about credit, because good work speaks for itself. Except good work doesn't speak for itself when someone else is doing all the talking. Zach absorbed everything I taught him like a sponge, then started presenting it as his own original thinking. At first, I corrected him gently in meetings. Actually, that framework came from the analysis I did last quarter. He'd laugh it off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, team effort, you know how it is. But the corrections got harder to make as Michael started giving Zach more and more visibility, more important presentations, more FaceTime with executives. Michael always praised me in private, behind closed doors where nobody else could hear. He'd call me into his office and tell me I was mission critical, absolutely essential to the division's success. I don't know what we'd do without you, he'd say, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. But in public settings, in meetings with executives or clients or the broader team, he praised Zach for executing the vision brilliantly. That vision was mine. Every single piece of it. I started noticing the pattern after about a year. Behind closed doors, Michael desperately needed me. He'd call me into his office for advice on strategy, on handling difficult clients, on solving technical problems that nobody else could figure out. I was his go-to person for every impossible situation, every crisis, every complex challenge. He'd ask my opinion on everything from product roadmaps to organizational structure. But the moment we stepped into a meeting, into any public setting where credit could be assigned and recognized, that relationship completely changed. Suddenly, Zach was the brilliant strategist with the innovative vision. Zach was the one who understood clients and could close difficult deals. I was just the person who helped implement things, who made sure the details were handled correctly. It's a special kind of invisible, being essential but never seen. Being the engine that powers everything while someone else gets to be the shiny hood ornament. After a while, you start to wonder if you imagined your own contributions. 3 weeks after the boardroom betrayal, I made a decision. I stopped soft coaching Zach. No more prep sessions before his presentations. No more drafting his client emails and letting him send them under his name. No more last-minute saves when he'd misunderstood something crucial. I just stopped, and I watched what happened. There was a major client pitch on a Thursday afternoon. Big potential contract, complex technical requirements, lots of money on the line. Zach presented alone, without my usual behind-the-scenes support. I sat in the back of the room and watched him flounder. He promised features we couldn't possibly deliver. He committed to timelines that were completely impossible. He quoted pricing that would actually lose us money. The client's face got tighter and tighter with each slide. And for once, I let him fail. The moment we left that conference room, I knew there would be consequences. The client was furious. Michael was furious. But I'd reached a breaking point. That's the day I started planning my exit in earnest. That evening, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and started updating my resume for the first time in 5 years. I began reaching out to old contacts in the industry. I started documenting everything, every project I'd led, every success I'd achieved, every time I'd cleaned up someone else's mess. Because I knew the day would come when I'd need proof of my value. Tuesday evening, 8:47 p.m. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I was tired, still angry, halfway through a bottle of wine on my couch. But something made me pick up. Allison Parker? The voice was professional, female, confident. Yes, I said cautiously. I'm calling on behalf of Skyline Innovations. Our SVP of Strategy saw your work on Neuroflow. Would you be open to a discreet conversation about opportunities? My heart didn't race. It stopped completely. Neuroflow was my algorithm, the one I developed over 18 intense months of research and testing. The predictive analytics system that was revolutionizing how ClearPoint handled client data. The one ClearPoint had patented under the company name, with my name buried in the fine print as a contributing inventor. Someone at Skyline had noticed. Not just the product itself, but who had actually built it. I'm listening, I said, setting down my wine glass carefully. The recruiter's voice was warm and genuine. We've been tracking your career for about a year now. We think you're being significantly underutilized at your current position. We believe you could do extraordinary things with the right support and resources. Underutilized. Such a polite, corporate word for what was really happening. For being used and erased and held back. Tell me more, I said, walking into my bedroom and closing the door even though I lived alone. Old habits from years of keeping everything quiet and professional. I scheduled my interviews at 6:30 a.m., before normal work hours, before anyone at ClearPoint would notice I was gone. At Skyline's headquarters, a gleaming building in the financial district, everything felt different from the first moment. They listened when I spoke. They took actual notes on what I said. They asked me detailed questions about strategy and vision, not about culture fit or team dynamics or any of the soft questions that usually came my way. The difference was stunning and immediate. At Skyline, senior executives wanted to understand exactly how I thought, how I approached complex problems, what my vision was for the future of AI analytics in the industry. Nobody interrupted me mid-sentence. Nobody dismissed my ideas as too ambitious or not realistic enough. They challenged me, yes, pushed back on some points, but in a way that felt like intellectual respect rather than undermining. The third interview was with the CEO, Malcolm Pierce. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, known throughout the industry as someone who built companies through talent rather than just capital. He asked me one question that changed everything. If you could build a strategy division from scratch, with unlimited resources and full authority, what would it look like? I talked for 30 minutes straight, outlining my vision. He took notes the entire time, asking clarifying questions, pushing me to go deeper. At the end, he closed his notebook and said, "When can you start?" Just like that. No committees, no delays, no "we'll let you know." Just when can you start? Skyline's offer letter arrived via email on a Sunday morning while I was having coffee on my tiny balcony. The subject line was simple: your future at Skyline. I opened it with hands that trembled slightly. Head of Strategic Growth. 7-figure base salary. 7-figure equity package that would vest over 4 years. A team of 12 talented people already assembled and waiting. Let us know if the offer is compelling enough to disrupt your plans, the email concluded. Oh, it disrupted more than that. It detonated my plans. I sat at my small kitchen table reading the offer letter 3 times, then a 4th, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding something. The salary alone was more than double what I made at Clearpoint after 5 years of modest raises. The equity package would be worth millions if Skyline kept growing at their current trajectory. But the real offer, the thing that made my chest tight, wasn't the money. It was the title. Head of Strategic Growth. Not Senior Strategist. Not Assistant VP. Not Associate Director, or any of the watered-down titles Michael had dangled in front of me for years like carrots I could never quite reach. This was real leadership, real authority, a real chance to build something meaningful from the ground up. I called Malcolm Pierce directly on his cell phone, the number he'd given me personally. "I accept," I said without preamble. "But I need you to know my current company will fight this hard. I have knowledge they'll claim as proprietary." Malcolm's response was immediate and firm. "We have an entire legal team for exactly that situation. Welcome to Skyline, Allison." I handed in my notice the next morning, walking into Michael's office at 8 a.m. before he'd finished his first coffee. I placed the resignation letter on his desk, 1 paragraph, clean and professional. Michael blinked at it like it was written in a foreign language. He read it twice, then looked up at me with something like confusion. "You're leaving?" As if the concept was impossible. "Yes," I said simply. "Effective 2 weeks from today." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "No counteroffer?" I asked, genuinely curious. He laughed, actually laughed, like I'd made an absurd joke. "Good luck out there, Allison. The market's tough for people without executive presence." The dismissal was casual, easy, like I was nothing. Like 5 years meant nothing. I smiled then, and I saw confusion flicker across his face. "You'll need it more than me," I said quietly. His expression changed just for a second. Something flickered behind his eyes. Uncertainty maybe, or the first hint of recognition that he'd miscalculated something important. But it passed quickly, replaced by his usual unshakable confidence. "If you're looking for gratitude, you won't find it anywhere else either," he said. "That's not what I'm looking for," I replied, standing. "I'm looking for respect." I walked out of his office for the last time. HR processed my exit within 2 hours. No exit interview. No thank you for your years of service. Just a cardboard box for my personal items and an automated email confirming my last day. 5 years of my life reduced to a single paragraph in their system. Day 1 at Skyline felt like walking into a different universe. My office wasn't a cubicle or a shared workspace. It was an actual office with a door and a window and a massive whiteboard wall. I stood there with a marker in my hand, staring at all that blank white space, all that possibility, and I started writing. 3 things went on that board in those first quiet moments. First, the names of my future team members, the 12 people already hired, plus 6 more positions I planned to create. Second, the patent choritin, neuroflow, and how we could build on it legally and ethically. Third, and this one I wrote purely on instinct, not knowledge, the Clearpoint division we were about to acquire. That third item surprised even me as I wrote it. I had no inside information, no concrete knowledge that an acquisition was coming. But something about Skyline's aggressive growth strategy, their intense focus on AI analytics, their recent funding round of $80 million, it all pointed in one direction. And if they were going to acquire a competitor in this space, ClearPoint's AI division would be the obvious target. My division, the one I'd built from nothing. I started mapping out what that acquisition would look like, how to integrate the technology without destroying what made it valuable, how to retain the key talented people who made it work, how to handle the inevitable political mess of absorbing a team from a direct competitor. I didn't know it was actually happening. Not yet. But I was preparing anyway, because that's what good strategists do. We see patterns before they become obvious to everyone else. 3 weeks into my new role, I was sitting in a strategy meeting with Skyline's executive team. We were discussing Q3 growth targets and potential market expansion. The CFO, a sharp woman named Patricia Huang, was walking through some financial projections when she dropped a bombshell so casually I almost missed it. Of course, these numbers assume we close the ClearPoint acquisition by end of quarter, she said, clicking to the next slide. My hands went completely cold. The room kept talking about integration timelines and legal due diligence and press strategy. I heard none of it. My brain was racing through 1,000 implications at once. ClearPoint's AI division. That was my division. The team I'd built. The products I designed. The strategy I'd created. Michael Turner would have to report up through Skyline's chain of command now, which meant, eventually, he'd report to me. The people I'd mentored, who'd watched me get pushed aside, would finally have a real choice about who they wanted to follow. And NeuroFlow, my algorithm, the one ClearPoint owned but I'd invented, that would belong to Skyline now, belong to me, in a way it never had before. Allison, Patricia was looking at me with concern. You're very quiet. Any initial thoughts on the acquisition? The entire executive team turned to face me. I smiled slowly, feeling something shift inside my chest. I think it's brilliant, I said. I know that division inside and out. Every product, every person, every process. I can make this integration completely seamless. Malcolm Pierce leaned forward. Good, he said. Because you're leading it. I worked late every single night for the next 2 weeks, mapping out exactly how to absorb ClearPoint's AI division, how to integrate their products with our existing platform, how to merge the patents and intellectual property, how to handle the duplicate positions and the inevitable conflicts. But most importantly, I mapped out the people. Who was truly talented, who was just coasting, who would thrive with real leadership, who would resist change. And then I started reaching out quietly. I sent careful messages to my old ments, the people I'd trained and supported. Something big is coming, I told them. Wait for the news. Then make your own choice. They waited. And then, one by one, they jumped. Jeremy was first. The junior analyst I'd mentored for 2 years, the one who'd looked away in the hallway the day I got passed over. He called me 2 hours after the acquisition was publicly announced. Is it true? He asked without saying hello. Are you really leading the integration? Yes, I said simply. I want to come with you. I should have spoken up before. I was a coward. You weren't a coward, I told him honestly. You were protecting your career. You were being smart and careful. But now you have a choice. A real choice. Within 1 week, 6 people from my old team had reached out. All of them wanted to join Skyline. All of them were tired of watching their work get credited to people who hadn't earned it. The exodus began, and there was nothing Michael could do to stop it. They weren't breaking contracts. They were just choosing better leadership. Michael sent his first email 3 days after the acquisition announcement. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long moment, my cursor hovering over the delete button. Then I filed it away without responding and went back to work. That same week, Skyline's acquisition hit TechCrunch with a headline that made me smile. Skyline acquires ClearPoint AI division in $117 million deal. I watched Michael's silence go loud. The article was detailed and thorough, covering the strategic value of the acquisition, the technology being absorbed, the market implications. Buried in the third paragraph was a single line that made my coffee taste sweeter. Industry sources indicate the acquisition was motivated in part by Skyline's recent hire of Allison Parker, former principal architect of ClearPoint's NeuroFlow algorithm and the division's top strategist. My phone exploded after that article went live. Former colleagues sending congratulations. Recruiters, who'd never responded to me before, suddenly very interested in connecting. Industry contacts I'd met at conferences wanting to grab coffee and pick my brain. And Michael, sending increasingly desperate emails that got progressively less professional. We should discuss the transition professionally. I have serious concerns about employee retention. This is highly unprofessional behavior. I forwarded every single one to Skyline's legal team and continued working. He'd spent 5 years making me invisible. Now he could experience exactly what that felt like. The transition meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Same boardroom at Clearpoint where I'd been passed over. Same long table. Same uncomfortable chairs. But everything else was different now. Michael sits at the far end of a table, in a chair that used to be his power position. Now he's labeled head of transition, which everyone knows is corporate speak for managing your own exit. I enter in a charcoal suit I bought specifically for this moment. Everyone at the table stands when I walk in. Not because they have to, but because power dynamics have shifted completely. "Welcome, Allison," Malcolm says from his position at the head of the table. "This is your show now." I take my seat and Michael's face is carefully, professionally blank. He's learned to hide his emotions over the years, master that CEO mask he wears so well. But I can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenches and unclenches, the slight tightness around his eyes. This is the same room where he promoted Zach over me 2 years ago. The same table where he told me I wasn't leadership material. Now I'm standing at the head of it with complete authority. "Thank you all for being here," I begin, my voice steady and clear. This integration represents a significant opportunity for both organizations. I outline the transition plan, the timeline I've developed, the key milestones we need to hit. Michael interrupts once, just once. "That timeline seems overly aggressive," he says. I don't hesitate. I pull up a document on the screen behind me, dated 15 months ago. "You already approved this exact approach," I say calmly. "Or did you forget?" The internal memo went out to every employee at both companies the following Monday. It detailed the leadership structure for the newly integrated division. My name was at the top as lead architect of the NeuroFlow acquisition strategy and head of strategic growth. Michael Turner's name wasn't mentioned anywhere in the document. It was like he'd never existed. A junior developer from his old team, someone I barely knew, sent me a private email that afternoon. "This should have happened years ago," it said simply. "Everyone knew you were the real strategist. We just couldn't say it out loud." The recognition felt surreal and overwhelming. After years of watching others take credit for my work, seeing my name properly attached to my own accomplishments was almost disorienting. The memo went into specific detail about my role in developing NeuroFlow, my strategic vision for the acquisition, my leadership of the integration team. It mentioned the Parker Protocol, the framework I'd created that would guide the entire integration. People I'd never met were stopping me in the hallways to offer congratulations. Industry publications were calling for interviews. Tech blogs were writing profiles. Malcolm sent a company-wide email praising the strategic hire that made this entire acquisition possible. For the first time in my entire career, my work was visible. Not because I'd fought tooth and nail for recognition, not because I'd played political games or demanded credit, but because I was finally at a company that valued transparency, that believed in giving proper credit, that understood the connection between recognition and retention. 2 weeks into the integration, Michael pushed back hard on the technical migration plan during a large team meeting. "This timeline is too aggressive," he said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he perfected over years. "It's not feasible with our current resources. We need at least 6 more months to do this properly." The room went quiet, waiting to see how I'd respond to the challenge. I pulled up a document on the shared screen without saying anything at first. It was dated 15 months ago, during my time at Clearpoint. My document, my migration plan, the exact same timeline and approach I proposed back then. "You already reviewed and approved this specific approach," I said calmly, highlighting the approval signatures at the bottom. Michael's signature was right there. "Or did you forget?" His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, embarrassment, then finally resignation. The entire integration team watched the exchange in absolute silence. Michael had forgotten. Of course he had. He dismissed my work so casually back then, called it too ambitious without really reading it, that he hadn't bothered to remember any of the details. But I remembered. I remembered every plan he'd rejected without consideration. Every strategy he called unrealistic. Every vision he dismissed as too ambitious or too complex. And now, with Skyline's resources and Malcolm's complete support, I was implementing every single one of them. Not for revenge, though that satisfaction was definitely there, but because they were genuinely good ideas that deserved to be executed properly by people who understood their value. The silence in that room said everything. Michael had nothing left to say. Zach reached out about 3 weeks after the acquisition became public knowledge. His message came through LinkedIn, carefully worded and professional. "Hey Allison, hope you're doing well at Skyline. I miss our synergy and the way we work together. Any chance you're hiring for your new team? Would love to catch up." I stared at the message for a long moment, then closed the window without responding. The audacity was almost funny. He'd watched the acquisition news, watched his former colleagues leave ClearPoint for Skyline, watched his own position become increasingly uncertain as the division he depended on disappeared. Now he wanted back in. He wanted to be part of the winning team again, to ride my coattails one more time. 2 days later, I posted an open position for Director of Product Strategy. It was a senior role, good salary, real responsibility. The kind of position Zach would absolutely apply for. I reviewed 43 applications over the next week. Talented people from all over the industry. Zach's resume came in on day 3. I moved it directly to the rejected folder without reading past his name. I filled the director role with someone from my new team at Skyline, someone I'd worked with for only 2 months but who already understood something crucial, that real leadership meant elevating others, not climbing over them. Someone who gave credit where it was due and built people up instead of tearing them down. Zach sent another message a week later asking about his application status. I didn't respond to that one either. It hit ClearPoint like a detonation on a quiet Monday morning. Skyline's press release went live at exactly 7:03 a.m., timed perfectly to catch the East Coast business news cycle. The headline was direct and devastating. Skyline Innovations acquires ClearPoint's analytics division in strategic talent buyout, led by industry veteran Allison Parker. My phone started lighting up instantly with notifications. First from Vanessa, my former colleague who I'd helped get promoted. "You didn't just leave," her text said. "You bought the whole floor? This is insane." Then from Zach, finally understanding what had happened. "Wait, you're the VP at Skyline? I thought you just moved to a competitor. Holy shit, Allison." Then from others, dozens of messages flooding in. But there was silence from Michael. Complete radio silence. For the first time in years, he had no script to control the narrative. He couldn't spin this to make himself look good. He couldn't bury the story or redirect attention. He couldn't position himself as the visionary leader. He was no longer in charge of anything. I sat in my new corner office, staring at the headline on my laptop screen, one hand steadying my espresso cup. That press release had done more than announce a corporate acquisition. It had erased every false version of me that Michael had tried to create over 5 years. The junior strategist who needed more seasoning. The support player who wasn't ready for leadership. The talented individual contributor who just didn't have executive presence. All of those carefully constructed lies gone, replaced with the truth. 3 weeks after the acquisition closed, Skyline's CTO presented our final integration roadmap to the combined board of directors. The presentation was comprehensive, covering every technical detail, every milestone, every risk and mitigation strategy. It was based entirely on the framework I'd created back at ClearPoint 2 years earlier. The one Michael had blocked and shelved. The one he'd later handed to Zach to present as if it was a new idea. "We're implementing a new strategic operations framework across the entire division," the CTO explained, clicking through the detailed slides. "We're branding it internally as the Parker Protocol, in recognition of its architect." I looked around the boardroom table carefully. No smirks from executives who thought it was too ambitious. No second-guessing about whether a woman could create something this comprehensive. Just respect. Just recognition. Just professionals acknowledging good work. Michael wasn't in the room. He'd been quietly moved to an advisory role 2 weeks earlier, which everyone in corporate America knows is just a polite way of managing someone out before the official termination. His division was now mine. His team was now mine. His legacy, the one he built partially on my invisible labor, was now mine. The Parker Protocol became standard operating procedure across all of Skyline within 3 months. Other companies in our industry started asking about it at conferences. Industry publications wrote case studies analyzing its effectiveness. Conference organizers invited me to speak about it. The framework I'd built in complete obscurity at ClearPoint was now reshaping how an entire sector approached strategic operations. And this time, everyone knew exactly who had created it. My name was on it. Permanently. I was walking out of Skyline's headquarters on a Thursday evening, later than usual, thinking about dinner when I saw him. Michael was standing in the lobby of ClearPoint's building across the plaza, visible through the massive glass walls. He was holding a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate endings. His security badge was gone from his belt. His shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before. He'd always carried himself with such confidence, such certainty. He looked up and saw me watching from across the plaza. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the distance. Then he walked out of the building and crossed toward me. I could have walked away, gotten in my car, avoided the conversation. But I didn't. I stood there and waited. "Guess you always were leadership material," he said when he reached me. His voice was quiet, stripped of all its usual authority. He gave a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. I nodded once. No smile. No gloating. No triumphant speech. Just clarity. Just acknowledgement. Because now he finally saw what had been obvious all along, and it was far too late for it to matter. I thought about saying something profound, something perfectly crafted that would capture the irony of this moment. But there was nothing to say. Michael's recognition didn't matter anymore. It had mattered 5 years ago when I was desperate for any acknowledgement. It had mattered 3 years ago when I still believed in the system. It had maybe even mattered 1 year ago when I was first planning my exit. But not now. Now I had a team that respected me, a company that valued me, and work that was properly credited to me. His opinion was irrelevant. So I just nodded and walked past him toward my car, because that's what you do when someone who once held power over you doesn't anymore. 6 months after the acquisition, I stood on stage at the Global Innovation Forum in San Francisco. The same stage where Michael had spoken for 3 consecutive years, always presenting his team's successes and innovations, always taking credit for work that other people had done. The auditorium was packed with over 2,000 people. Industry leaders, startup founders, investors, journalists. The room was completely silent as I approached the podium. There was a time I let other people decide how visible I should be. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the massive space. The spotlight was bright and warm on my face. I thought if I just did excellent work, if I stayed quiet and professional, if I kept my head down and delivered results, someone would eventually notice. Someone would eventually give me credit. The room stayed silent. Every eye was fixed on me. I could see people in the front rows, leaning forward, slightly. But innovation without recognition isn't leadership, I continued. It's exploitation. And silence isn't professionalism. It's complicity in your own erasure. That line got a standing ovation that started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. I waited for it to settle before continuing. I talked for 40 minutes about strategic development, about building teams that actually functioned, about creating systems that credited work properly, about the importance of visibility for underrepresented voices in technology, about how companies that hide their real talent eventually lose that talent to competitors who know how to recognize value. The audience was completely engaged, taking notes, nodding along. People lined up afterward for nearly an hour. Young women who'd experienced similar situations and wanted advice. Men who recognized they'd been the Zach in someone else's story and wanted to do better. Executives who were genuinely rethinking how they managed and promoted talent. And in the back, standing alone near the exit, I saw Michael. He'd come to watch. He didn't approach me afterward. He didn't try to congratulate me or apologize or explain. He just stood there for a few minutes, watching the crowd around me, then quietly left. That moment meant more than any apology could have. Exactly 1 year to the day since I'd walked out of ClearPoint for the last time, I sat on the rooftop terrace of Skyline's headquarters during our quarterly celebration. The city skyline shimmered below us as the sun set, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. We just hit our largest growth quarter in company history. Revenue up 68% year over year. Market share doubled in our primary sector. And my division had led the charge, accounting for 43% of that growth. A new team member, a brilliant young developer we'd hired from MIT, approached me with a drink in hand. "Is it true you used to work for the company we just outran in the market?" she asked. She was young, maybe 25, and still had that eager energy of someone new to the industry. I smiled, watching the lights of Clearpoints building across the harbor. "Let's just say they trained me very well," I replied, "in exactly what not to do." She laughed, and I raised my glass in a toast. I was surrounded by people who finally saw me. Not the diminished version Michael had tried to create, not the invisible worker bee, but the actual strategist and leader I'd always been. People who valued my ideas, who implemented my frameworks, who gave me credit for my work. People who understood that talent without recognition is just exploitation in professional clothing. Because I didn't just win a promotion or get revenge on someone who'd wronged me. I redefined what leadership looked like, at least in my corner of the industry. I proved that quiet competence eventually becomes loud success when you stop letting other people control your narrative. That loyalty to yourself matters infinitely more than loyalty to people who don't value you. That sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just being undeniably, visibly, impossibly good at what you do. The city lights reflected off the windows of Clearpoints building across the harbor. Smaller now, diminished, their market share shrinking as ours expanded, while Skyline's headquarters gleamed bright and growing. I thought about the person I was in that boardroom 1 year ago, hands shaking with anger and humiliation, watching someone else get promoted with my work. She would be proud of who I became. Not because I destroyed Michael Turner, though I'd certainly played a role in his professional downfall. Not because I'd gotten some perfect revenge, but because I'd finally stopped letting him define me. Stopped letting anyone define me except myself. I'd learned the most important lesson that corporate America tries to hide from people like me. Your value doesn't depend on whether someone else recognizes it. Your value is inherent. And when you truly understand that, when you own it completely, you become unstoppable. I took a sip of champagne and looked around at my team. Jeremy was there, now a senior analyst thriving under actual leadership. 3 other people from Clearpoint who'd made the jump. 8 new hires who'd come because they'd heard about the culture we were building. All of them talking and laughing, celebrating success they'd actually contributed to and would actually be credited for. Malcolm appeared beside me, his own glass raised. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. I smiled. "Just thinking about bridges," I said. "Some burn, some collapse under their own weight, and some, once you rebuild them properly, become stronger than they ever were." He clinked his glass against mine. "To building better bridges," he said. "And to leaders who actually deserve the title," I replied. As the sun finished setting and the city lights took over, I felt something I hadn't felt in years at Clearpoint. Not just success or satisfaction or vindication, though all of those were present. I felt peace, the bone-deep peace of being exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do, with people who see you clearly. That, in the end, was worth more than any promotion Michael Turner could have given me. Because I'd given it to myself,